Hello friends, welcome back. In this video, we will be discussing one more reading comprehension exercise that is forming part of your CAT and other management entrance examination. So I have specifically selected a passage that is consistently rated as tough by many of the aspirants over the years, not only because of the subject that it is dealing with, but because of the complexity of the language, slightly complex language, as well as because of the trickiness of the questions. The questions are not very easy, slightly tricky. But the flip side is that if you go through the passage very carefully, then you can easily understand the topic. Once you understand the topic, and there are only 3 or 4 points that you need to understand and keep in mind. When you are able to do this, you are able to answer all the questions without a problem. Some of the questions are slightly tricky, but all the other questions are very simple, straightforward. So you should be able to answer those simple, straightforward questions very easily and focus your attention on the tricky questions for some time. Then you will easily get the answer. So this is why such kind of passages are actually useful to you. You might find that these are very difficult, but once you understand the passage very clearly, the answers become very obvious, and the entire exercise you can do without an issue. But again, the key is to understand the passage. So I already told you for all the videos, it is always better to attempt the exercise first and then watch the video. So the link for the PDF is given in the description. So please click on the link and then open the PDF and make an attempt of the exercise first. Whatever will be your attempt, don't worry about the results and all, just attempt it so that you understand the background of the passage, then come back and watch the video so that your understanding becomes more clear. You will be able to equip yourselves with the techniques that you can use in these kind of passages. So the passage, I presume that you have already attempted it. So you can see that the passage is around 454 words long, means you might take around 1.5 to 2 minutes in reading the passage itself. But in this kind of passages, I would suggest that you take more time, devote more attention to understanding the passage by taking one more minute in addition. That means I have told in the exercise, I have said that there are 9 questions. So 18 minutes is the maximum time allowed. Out of the allowed 18 minutes, maybe you take some 3.5 minutes in reading and understanding the passage well by reading it maybe 2 times, or if required 3 times, and then noting down the main points. I'm not saying that you have to physically note it down. In your brain, you have to note down the main points. Only there are 3 or 4 main points that you need to understand. Once the concept is very clear, the answer or the questions become very easy. So this is the technique that you should use for tough passages, especially talking about subjects related to science, philosophy, etc. More attention or more time should be given to reading and understanding the passage. If you try to attempt the questions with a half-hearted knowledge of the passage, most of your answers are likely to end up being wrong. So this is a mistake that people continuously make. They will become over anxious in going for the questions without understanding the passage. So that kind of half-baked knowledge will not help you in making a good attempt at difficult passages. So this passage is basically talking about the effects of caffeine on human body, how caffeine is stimulating the body. We know that caffeine is a chemical that is contained in coffee, tea, etc. So whenever we drink coffee, tea, etc., our brain becomes more stimulated, we become more active. So whenever we feel dull or not very enthusiastic or energetic at that time, we have a cup of a tea or a coffee, and then suddenly our brain becomes more energetic, we become more active. So how this is happening, that is discussed, and basically the passage is talking about one theory that is proposed by these 3 people, scientists, Snyder, Daly, and Burns. So a new theory has been proposed by them, and and this theory is seeking to replace an older theory. And we talk about the new theory first, then we talk about the old theory, then we talk about some experiments made by these people to prove this new theory, and then we talk about a possible exception to this theory and how they are dealing with that particular exception. So these are the things, and once we understand we can go to the details. Snyder, they have recently proposed a theory on caffeine, the most widely used psychoactive substance. What is a psychoactive substance? Any substance that improves your psychological behavior or improves the state of your mind and your body, that is called a psychoactive. Making your mind and body more active, that is a psychoactive substance. And caffeine is the most widely used psychoactive substance as per the passage, and how caffeine is stimulating the human body. So that is the subject of the new theory by these three people, Snyder, Daly, and Burns. And what are they saying? They are saying that there is a naturally occurring chemical called adenosine in the human brain, which reduces the nerve activity in the brain by preventing neuron transmission. So we know that when neurons transmit, then that is actually making the nerve activity more vigorous. When nerve activity becomes more vigorous, we become more active and alert. And this particular chemical in the brain called adenosine is preventing the neuroactivity by reducing the preventing neuron transmission. And how they are doing it? By attaching itself to the receptors in the nerve membrane. So we know that nerves have membranes, and on the nerve membranes there are receivers. Receptors means receivers, and these receivers are doing the neuron transmission. So what adenosine is doing? Adenosine is attaching itself to the receptors, or they are blocking the receivers by attaching itself to the receptors. So adenosine is a naturally occurring chemical in the human brain. So this chemical attaches itself to the receivers of nerve membranes, preventing neuron transmission. So when neuron transmission is prevented, we become nerve activity becomes less, we become dull, non-energetic, etc. So that is the thing. And how caffeine is countering it? Caffeine is structurally similar to adenosine. So caffeine and adenosine are very similar in structure, as a result of which caffeine is also doing the same thing what adenosine is doing. They attach itself to nerve receptors. So what is the difference then? While adenosine, when it attaches to nerve receptors, it is preventing neuron transmission. But caffeine, when it attaches to nerve receptors, it is not preventing neuron transmission. So what caffeine is doing? Caffeine is removing adenosine from the nerve receptors and attaching itself there. So the difference between caffeine and adenosine is that adenosine, when they attach itself to nerve receptors, they are preventing or blocking neuron transmission, but caffeine is not blocking neuron transmission. So since caffeine does not block neuron transmission, nerves become more active. And when nerves become active, we become physically or mentally alert, energetic, etc. This is the theory proposed by Snyder, Daly, and Burns. So caffeine counters the action of adenosine, enabling neuron activity, leading to stimulation. So in a nutshell, we can say that the new theory says that caffeine is stimulating neuron activity by preventing adenosine from attaching to the nerve receptors, by attaching itself to the nerve receptors. So caffeine removes adenosine from the nerve receptors and attaches itself to nerve receptors, thus enabling nerve receptors to do the transmissions more actively, so that stimulation is maintained. So this is the theory. Now the second paragraph talks about another theory which was in existence for a very long period of time. And what was this theory? This theory is also about how caffeine is stimulating the human brain. And this theory says that there is a particular enzyme in the body called, what is that enzyme called? Phosphodiesterase. So there is an enzyme called phosphodiesterase in the human brain, and this enzyme's production is prevented by caffeine. So here it says about, the old theory says that caffeine prevents the production of an enzyme called phosphodiesterase. And how it is stimulating the human brain? Because phosphodiesterase is actually reducing a chemical called cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP is a chemical that improves the neuron activity. So cyclic AMP is a chemical that is present in the human brain, which improves, or when it is present in high concentrations, it stimulates the nerve activity in the body, so making us more alert and energetic. So phosphodiesterase is an enzyme that breaks down cyclic AMP, means it reduces the amount of cyclic AMP in the body. So when phosphodiesterase reduces the cyclic AMP, it reduces the activity of the nerve. So what caffeine is doing? Caffeine is preventing the production of phosphodiesterase. So when caffeine prevents the production of phosphodiesterase, what happens? Cyclic AMP will be present in more high concentrations in the body. So when it is present in high concentrations for a long period of time, what happens? Nerve activity happens. So it automatically increases cyclic AMP and thus improving nerve stimulation. So this was the old theory. And now Snyder and others are saying that this theory is wrong. This theory is incorrect. Why? What is the problem with this theory as per Snyder? Because they say that the amount of caffeine that we need to consume to prevent the production of this phosphodiesterase is very large. So normally, the whatever caffeine we are consuming that gives us stimulation, that is not adequate to prevent the production of phosphodiesterase. Or in other words, we need to consume a large amount of caffeine to get the stimulation that we are normally getting from a cup of coffee. Means we drink a cup of coffee, we feel energetic, motivated, alert, etc. So that much caffeine is not enough to prevent the production of phosphodiesterase. So that is the first weakness in this theory. What is the second weakness? Second weakness is that there are many other enzymes that can also prevent the production of phosphodiesterase. So it is not just caffeine that can prevent the production of phosphodiesterase. There are many other compounds in the that can prevent the production. So if this theory had been correct, all those compounds could produce nerve stimulation, which is not happening. So if this older theory had been correct, then all the other compounds that are able to prevent the production of phosphodiesterase should also have produced the stimulation which caffeine is producing. So that is not happening. So only caffeine is stimulating, not other compounds that is preventing the production. So that is the second weakness. So this para is basically talking about two weaknesses in the existing theory or the older theory that says that caffeine is producing stimulation by preventing the production of phosphodiesterase. So this is the second para. What about the third para? Third para is talking about the how he's buttressing their theory, how the scientists are reinforcing or strengthening their theory, how they have done some experiments on laboratory mice, and these mice, they were given this caffeine or various derivatives of caffeine. What is derivative? Derivative, anything that is derived from caffeine or anything that contains caffeine is called a derivative of caffeine. So various derivatives of caffeine are introduced into the brains of laboratory mice, and it is measured how these derivatives ability to bind to the receptors of the nerves and how they are able to improve the stimulation or locomotion. Locomotion means physical activity of the mice. And this experiment found that when any particular derivative of caffeine is able to attach itself to the nerve receptors in a very good manner, then they are also producing very good stimulation. So the amount of efficiency with which the caffeine derivatives are able to attach itself to the nerve receptors, dislodging adenosine, then the higher their ability to physical stimulation. So that is how they are proving the theory that this caffeine is actually producing stimulation by dislodging adenosine. Dislodging means removing adenosine from the nerve receptors and attaching itself there. So this is this is how they proved their theory, and they says that theophylline, a stimulant present in tea. So this is another derivative of caffeine, theophylline. It is a stimulant that is present in tea, and it is structurally similar to caffeine. So as a result of which, they are able to bind itself to the receptors very, very efficiently and producing stimulation effectively. So the higher the capacity to bind itself to nerve receptors, the higher their ability to produce physical stimulation. So this is how the theory was reinforced or strengthened with the help of laboratory experiments. And paragraph 4 talks about some exceptions to this hypothesis. There are certain cases in which this theory is not working out. So that paragraph or the last para is talking about some such exceptions, and one such exception is about a compound called IBMX. So this also is a derivative of caffeine, and this particular compound is also able to attach itself to the nerve receptors very well. So that is, the theory says that when any caffeine derivative is able to attach itself to nerve receptors, they are able to produce very good stimulation. Whereas in the case of IBMX, they are able to attach itself to nerve receptors very effectively, but they are not improving the stimulation but reducing it. So this is the problem or an exception to the theory. So the theory says that any derivative that is able to attach itself very well to the receptors, they can produce very good stimulation. But IBMX, even though it can attach itself, it is not able to produce stimulation. In fact, it is reducing the stimulation. But Snyder suggests that this is not a problem at all in their theory, or this particular exception is not weakening their theory, because it is to be expected of all psychoactive substances because they have mixed effects. So it says that it is not that this is going to weaken the theory, because all psychoactive substances. So caffeine is a psychoactive substance. So they have mixed effects. Like why the mixed effects? At very low concentrations, they might be reducing physical stimulation instead of improving it. So even caffeine at very low concentration is not able to improve the stimulation but reduce it. So this is why it says that all psychoactive substances have mixed effects on the body. So that is why this behavior of IBMX is not going to weaken the theory. The theory still holds good that any caffeine derivative that is able to attach itself to nerve receptors will be producing good stimulation. But only thing is that it should be at a reasonably good concentration. At very low concentrations, they may not be able to produce stimulation. They will be reducing the stimulation. So these are the things. So in a nutshell, what we can say about the passage, it is talking about mainly 4 points. First point is that caffeine is producing stimulation in the body by removing adenosine from the nerve receptors and putting itself there. That is the first point. Second point, the old theory regarding caffeine producing stimulation by reducing the production of phosphodiesterase is wrong. What is the third theory, or the third statement is that if any caffeine derivative that is able to attach itself to the nerve receptors effectively, that can produce an equal amount of good stimulation. That is a third theory. Fourth theory says that there are certain exceptions, and these exceptions are not weakening the theory, because if in reasonably good concentrations, caffeine and any other stimulants can produce stimulating effect, but some exceptions are always there. So these are the 4 things that are stated in the passage. Now, once you understand this, the entire questions become very, very simple. The primary purpose of the passage is the first question. Discuss a plan for investigation of a phenomenon that is not yet fully understood. Is the author proposing any investigation or further research into this particular phenomenon? Or is he saying that this is not fully understood? No. The passage says that this is clearly understood. The passage has clearly proven it. The passage does not propose any further investigation, nor does it say that this is not fully understood. So this is wrong. Option 2, present 2 explanations of a phenomenon and reconcile the differences between them. He is presenting 2 explanations, correct? The older explanation as well as the new explanation. And is there any reconciliation of the differences? What do you mean by reconciliation of the differences? Balancing the differences, or saying that how the differences can be clearly explained by both the explanations. No, the passage very clearly says that the older explanation is not going to be correct scientifically, because the older explanation has certain weaknesses that cannot be reconciled. Reconciled means that cannot be understood properly, or that cannot be explained using the new method also. That is reconciled. So the older explanation has 2 particular weaknesses that cannot be reconciled, as a result of which reconciliation of the differences is not suggested in the passage. So this is wrong. Option C, Summarize two theories and suggest a third theory. Again, wrong, because a third theory is not at all suggested. Summarize two theories. Okay, we can accept that. Third theory is not at all suggested. And further, it says overcomes the problems encountered in the first two. There are no problems encountered in the second and the recent theory. The first theory had problems, and these problems are not overcome using a third theory because a third theory is not there. Option D, describe an alternative hypothesis that provides evidence and arguments that support it. What is an alternative hypothesis? A theory that is replacing the present theory, that is an alternative hypothesis. So this is correct because the passage is talking about the older theory and it says that a new theory is going to is able to explain the phenomenon further, removing the weaknesses in the old theory. So that is why this is a good answer. Alternative hypothesis providing evidences, is providing evidences as well as arguments to support it. So good answer, keep it in your mind. Option E, challenge the validity of a theory by exposing the inconsistencies and contradictions in it. He is challenging the validity of a theory. Which theory is he challenging? The older theory. By exposing the inconsistencies, correct, and contradictions. Contradictions are not there. The theories are exposing the, yes, contradictions, you can say contradiction is there because the second part is a contradiction, because if all substances that could prevent the production of phosphodiesterase could stimulate, then the old theory would have been correct, but only caffeine is able to prevent the produce stimulation. There are many other compounds that are able to reduce the production of phosphodiesterase, but they are not able to provide stimulation. So that is why contradiction is there, inconsistency is there. So the theory is challenged. That also is a good answer. But what is our question? The primary purpose. What is the main purpose? Is it to challenge the validity of a theory? No, it is to present an alternative theory and provide evidences to support the theory. So out of D and D, D is the better answer. E is the less better answer, or he is the worse answer, you can say, because these two are good answers, out of which the primary purpose is to describe the new theory. It is not to talk about the validity of the old theory or challenge the validity of the old theory. It is done only in the third paragraph. In all the other paragraphs, the author is talking about the new theory, providing evidences to support it. So option D will be the answer. Question number 2. Which of the following, if true, would most weaken the theory proposed by Snyder? So et al means and others. So et al means and others. So Snyder and others are proposing a theory. Which of these options would weaken that theory? So what is the theory proposed by Snyder? It says that caffeine is improving the stimulation or reproducing stimulation by dislodging the adenosine from the nerve receptors and putting itself in its place and thus enabling a neuron transmission. This is the theory. Now, what can weaken the theory? That is the question. Very low concentrations in the human brain, both caffeine and theophylline tend to have depressive rather than stimulatory effects. It says that at very low concentrations, neither caffeine nor theophylline can have stimulatory effects. It has depressive effect. That is already stated in the passage. This is a problem with the theory, but the passage itself says that this is not going to weaken the theory because it is expected of all psychoactive substances. All psychoactive substances have mixed effects on the human brain depending on the concentration. So at very low concentration in the human brain, both caffeine and theophylline have depressive effect. This is already addressed by the passage. It is expected, the passage says, so it is nothing new. It is not going to weaken the theory because this is already handled in the passage. Then option B, the ability of caffeine derivatives at very low concentrations to dislodge adenosine from its receptors in mouse brains correlates well with their ability to stimulate mouse locomotion at this low concentration. What is the meaning? Even though it is given in a very roundabout manner, what is the meaning? Even at very low concentrations, what can happen? Caffeine can stimulate mouse locomotion. So that is the simple meaning. Means even when caffeine is consumed in very low quantities, it is able to stimulate mouse locomotion. Whereas the passage says that the theory has a weakness that at very low levels of caffeine concentration, the locomotion or the physical mental activity is depressed rather than stimulated. This is a problem, but that is expected of all psychoactive substances. That is what the passage says. Whereas this option says that even in very low quantities, caffeine is able to stimulate locomotion in it is able to dislodge adenosine and stimulate locomotion. Means it is removing that weakness in the theory. So when it removes the weakness in the theory, it is actually supporting the theory. So we need something that weakens the theory. This is not weakening, it is supporting our theory by removing the weakness that is present in the theory, which is already discussed in the passage. Option C, the concentration of cyclic AMP in target neurons in the human brain that leads to increased neuron firing can be produced by several different phosphodiesterase inhibitors in addition to caffeine. Means what? What is the meaning? The passage says that caffeine is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor. Inhibitor is something that prevents phosphodiesterase production. So just like caffeine, there are many other things which can produce which can have this phosphodiesterase inhibition. So means there are many other things which can act like caffeine and improve the neuron activity in the cells or in the brain. So it says that concentration of cyclic AMP neurons in the human brain that leads to increased neuron. So when cyclic AMP is increased, it really increases the neuron activity. So cyclic AMP increase can be produced by not just by caffeine, many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors have this ability. True, it is stated in the passage that many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors are able to reduce the phosphodiesterase production, but they are not able to produce stimulation. That is what the passage says. See in the third para. Second para, sorry. This option is talking about the weakness, the second weakness of the older theory. That means there are many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors, but they are not able to produce stimulation. Whereas this option says that there are many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors that are able to produce stimulation. So will it weaken the new theory? It actually supports the old theory, right? The old theory, this is a weakness of the old theory, that there are many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors that they are not able to produce stimulation. This option says that there are many other phosphodiesterase inhibitors which can produce stimulation. So this weakness is removed, but still there is one more weakness in the old theory. What is that weakness? You need to consume a large amount of caffeine to produce phosphodiesterase inhibition. So that is not what we do. We consume a cup of coffee, then we get stimulation. So this is not matching, because if phosphodiesterase inhibition can be done only through a large amount of caffeine, how just by drinking 1 cup of coffee we are getting stimulated? That is what this weakness is asking. So that weakness is not addressed. It is only talking about one weakness of the older theory. It is not talking about the main weakness. So because of which this may not be weakening the new theory, because when will you weaken the new theory? When the old theory is completely strengthened, that will weaken the new theory. Whereas the main weakness of the old theory is not this one. The main weakness of the old theory is regarding the amount of caffeine required to produce phosphodiesterase inhibition. So that is why this option is only partially weakening the new theory by partially strengthening the old theory. So this may not be a good answer because it is not fully weakening we need an answer that weakens the old theory mostly, or completely weakens the new theory. Not on the old theory, new theory, which completely weakens the new theory. This option is only partially weakening the new theory by partially strengthening the old theory. So it may not be a good answer. Please listen to the explanations carefully. This is slightly complex. Option D, the concentration of caffeine required to dislodge adenosine from its receptors in the human brain is much greater than the concentration that provides behavioral stimulation. Means what? The same problem that was it says that the same weakness that is there in the old theory is there in the new theory. Means the amount of caffeine required for dislodging adenosine is very huge. It is not present in the normal cup of coffee we are taking. Means whenever we are taking a cup of coffee, we are getting behavioral stimulation. But this kind of behavioral stimulation cannot be done by one cup, or this kind of behavioral stimulation is not produced by dislodging adenosine, because in order to dislodge adenosine, you need a large amount of caffeine. So this statement is basically saying that when we drink a cup of coffee, the stimulation we get is not because of adenosine dislodgement, because that requires a large amount of caffeine, not the amount of caffeine we are drinking to get stimulated. So this is a weakness, definitely a weakness. This is the same weakness in the old theory. The old theory also says that the amount of caffeine required to reduce the production of phosphodiesterase is very huge. Normally, the amount of caffeine we take is for getting stimulation is very less, so that is not matching. So that was the weakness in the old theory. So if the same weakness is there in the new theory regarding the concentration or the amount or the quantity, then this becomes a weakness, a real weakness. So this could be your answer. Keep it in your mind. Option E, the concentration of IBMX required to dislodge adenosine from its receptors in mouse brains is much smaller than the concentration that stimulates locomotion. Means what? The passage says that IBMX is able to dislodge adenosine but not able to stimulate locomotion. So if this option says that IBMS, the quantity required to dislodge adenosine is very small compared to the quantity required to stimulate locomotion. Whereas option says that the IBMX, or passage says that IBMX is not able to stimulate locomotion at all. So even if you have lesser quantity and then able to dislodge adenosine, still not able to provide activity. What does that mean? What does that mean? Much smaller than the concentration that stimulates locomotion in the mouse. Means at a very small concentrations, adenosine can be dislodged, but locomotion is not there. So you need to consume a very, if you consume large amount of IBMX, what will happen? There will be locomotion or there will be stimulation. So the basic meaning of the passage is that when you consume large amount of IBMX, that is able to produce stimulation in the body. Passage says that IBMX is not able to produce stimulation. So option says that IBMX, if consumed in large quantities, can produce stimulation. So this is actually removing the weakness present in the new theory. So in a way, it is supporting the new theory. Have you understood clearly? If this option is removing the weakness present in the old new theory, so when you remove the weakness present in the new theory, it is always supporting the new theory. We need an option that weakens the new theory. So this is definitely not an option that weakens the new theory. So option D is the clear and correct answer. This is the toughest question in this particular passage. So that is why it takes some lengthy analysis. So if you found this question to be tough, yeah, my advice is that you skip this question. There are many other very easy questions which can be answered in a jiffy. So go for those questions. And if you have time, then come back and attempt these questions, or else you should neglect or disregard this question. Don't spend too much time on this kind of tricky questions. Do you know why? What is the purpose in giving these two questions in the, or the second question in the number 2 place? Because candidates spend a lot of time trying to find the answer here. So most of their time will be lost here. As a result of this, they will not be attempting the other questions. So these kind of tricks CAT generally plays with candidates. So you have to be aware in question selection. So always skip such difficult questions and go for easier questions and come back to the difficult questions. So that should be the strategy. Third question, according to Snyder and others, caffeine differs from adenosine in that. So how caffeine is different from adenosine? So this is only first paragraph. Caffeine is similar to adenosine in structure, when caffeine, like adenosine, attaches itself to the nerve receptors. But unlike adenosine, caffeine is not preventing the neuron transmission. Adenosine prevents neuron transmission. Caffeine does not prevent neuron transmission. This is the difference. Or in other ways, caffeine and adenosine are similar. So this you can very easily see from the first paragraph. So what will be the answer? permits release of neurotransmitters when it is bound to adenosine receptors, whereas adenosine inhibits such release. Yes. When adenosine receptors means nerve receptors on which normally adenosine is attached. So because adenosine is a natural chemical found in the body, so adenosine is normally attached to the nerve receptors. So when caffeine attaches itself to these neuroreceptors, removing adenosine from its place, they permit a release of neurotransmitters, whereas when adenosine was attached to the nerve receptors, they prevent the neurotransmission. That is why adenosine, when attached, it will reduce stimulation. Caffeine, when attached, it produces stimulation. So very clearly, option D will be the answer. So once you understand paragraph 1, this is very easily. Option A stimulates behavior in the mouse and in humans, whereas adenosine stimulates behavior in humans only. Wrong, because the experiment is done in a mouse for both adenosine and caffeine, and that experiment is extrapolated to human beings. That is what paragraph 3 is saying. Paragraph 3 says the experiments are done on mouse, and the scientists are saying that this can be equally effective on human beings. So this is why you cannot say that stimulates. There is a difference in stimulation in mouse and humans. Wrong answer. Option B, mixed effects on the brain. Caffeine has mixed effects, whereas adenosine only has a stimulatory effect. Caffeine has mixed effects, that is stated in paragraph 4. When in low concentrations, it is reducing the stimulation. That is also stated. Adenosine is having stimulatory effect. Wrong. Adenosine is having only a non-stimulatory effect, because adenosine is not stimulating, it is preventing stimulation. So this is wrong. Option C, increases cyclic AMP concentration, where caffeine increases cyclic AMP concentration in target neurons. Correct, because by preventing the production of phosphodiesterase, it increases cyclic AMP concentration. Correct, whereas adenosine decreases such concentration. Adenosine is not at all related to cyclic AMP. Adenosine has nothing to do with cyclic AMP. So that is why this is wrong again. Option E, inhibits both the neuron firing and production of phosphodiesterase. What? Caffeine. Caffeine inhibits both neuron firing and production of phosphodiesterase. Wrong. Caffeine is not preventing neuron firing. Caffeine is promoting neuron firing. So this part is wrong. It is preventing the production of phosphodiesterase. That is correct. When there is a sufficient concentration in the brain, that is also correct. Whereas adenosine inhibits only neuron firing. So this part is wrong. This part is correct, because caffeine is inhibiting the production of phosphodiesterase when there is sufficient concentration. That is true. Whereas adenosine inhibits only neuron firing. That also is true. But caffeine inhibits neuron firing is wrong. So that is why this option is wrong. So very clearly, option D will be the answer. Okay, go to the fourth question. In response, now it is only downhill. All the questions are very easy. So this is why you need to scan through the questions and select the questions carefully, because you are always running short of time. So you need to maximize your productivity by carefully selecting the easy questions and answering them first, and then go for difficult questions if you have time. Otherwise, you leave the difficult questions, get as much marks as you can from the passage, and go to the next passage. This is a strategy you should adopt. You should not be taking too much time on any one passage. In response to experimental results concerning IBMX, Snyder and others contended that it is not uncommon for psychoactive drugs to have. So we are talking about IBMX. So IBMX is a caffeine derivative, but unlike other caffeine derivatives, IBMX is able to attach to neuron receptors, but not able to produce stimulation. That is what the passage says. And the passage also says that this is not unexpected. It is expected because all psychoactive substances have mixed effects on the brain. So very clearly, option A is the answer. It is not uncommon. It means it is common, or it is expected, because all psychoactive drugs have mixed effects. Very clearly, option A will be the answer. Para 4 will give you the answer. Then you need not even look at the other options, but for the sake of discussion, we can go for the other answers. Inhibitory effects on enzymes in the brain. IBMX having inhibitory effects on enzymes in the brain. The only enzyme we are discussing is phosphodiesterase. And phosphodiesterase, whether it is all psychoactive drugs are inhibitory effects, we don't know. We are only talking about caffeine. So this is not the answer. We are looking for close structural relationship with caffeine. All caffeine derivatives are called close structural relation. This is also correct, but not the answer we are looking for, because we are talking about when we talk about the experimental results, means in the context of the fourth para, what is Snyder and others saying? That is the option. So these are not regarding the context of the fourth para. Then all psychiatric drugs are depressive effects on mouse locomotion. Again, wrong. It is not having depressive effects. Option E, only IBMX is having depressive effects. Then ability to dislodge caffeine. So it is not uncommon in the case of option D. All psychoactive drugs having depressive effects is a wrong statement. Only IBMX is seen to have depressive effects. That is why this D is wrong. Option E, the disability to lodge caffeine from receptors in the brain. Ability to dislodge caffeine from receptors. All psychoactive drugs have the ability to dislodge what? Adenosine, not caffeine. So all psychoactive drugs have the ability to dislodge adenosine from receptors in the brain. So this statement itself is wrong. Even if it is correct, this is not the answer, because in the context of IBMX, why Snyder is saying that it is expected that psychoactive drugs to have mixed effects. So option A is the clear answer. Question number 5, the passage suggests that Snyder and all believe that if the older theory concerning caffeine's effects were correct, which of the following would have to be the case? So if the older theory is correct, then what would be the conditions under which the old theory would be correct? So what are the conditions to be satisfied for the old theory to be correct? So you know that there are two weaknesses in the old theory. What are the two weaknesses? First is that the amount of caffeine that is required to prevent the production of phosphodiesterase is very huge. Normally, that much the caffeine we are not consuming to produce stimulation. So if this theory had been correct, we needed to consume a lot of caffeine to get stimulation. So that is why option and the second weakness is that there are many other compounds that can prevent the production of phosphodiesterase, but none of these compounds are producing the stimulation that caffeine is producing. So these are the two conditions. And what are the statements here? All neurotransmitters would increase in the short term, increase the short-term concentration of cyclic AMP in target neurons. So what the paragraph is saying? All the cyclic AMP concentration, a number of neurotransmitters exert their effects by first increasing the cyclic AMP concentration. So cyclic AMP quantities are increased in the target neurons for improving the stimulation or improving the activity. So whenever prolonged periods of elevated concentrations, mass might be brought about by a phosphodiesterase inhibitor. So if there is a so there is something that inhibits phosphodiesterase, what will happen? Long periods of high levels of cyclic AMP concentration would be there. That will lead to a large amount of neuron firing and behavioral stimulation. So the passage is that when there is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, then that will suppress the production of phosphodiesterase, as a result of which cyclic AMP production will be more, and when prolonged periods, long periods of high levels of cyclic AMP production will lead to a large amount of neuron activity, leading to behavioral stimulation. So this is what has to happen for the old theory to be correct. So what option is saying? All neurotransmitters would increase the short-term concentration of cyclic AMP. So passage says that if the old theory had been correct, the long-term concentration of cyclic AMP will be increased, and that will lead to behavioral changes. Whereas here the passage says that all neurotransmitters would increase the short-term concentration of cyclic AMP. So that is not the correct answer. If the old theory had to be correct, long-term concentration of cyclic AMP has to be increased. So this is why option 1 will not be correct. Option 2, substances other than caffeine that inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase would be stimulants. True, because the weakness in the old theory is that there are other substances that are inhibiting the production of phosphodiesterase, but they are not stimulants. So if these substances are also stimulants, then the weakness in that old theory will be removed. So this becomes a valid theory. So this is a good answer for the old theory to be correct. Then option third statement, all concentration levels of caffeine that are high enough to produce stimulation would also inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase. Yes, that also is a good statement, because the weakness in the old theory is that the a quantity that is required to produce stimulation is not enough to produce or reduce the reduce the production of phosphodiesterase. Or if the quantity that is enough, that is high enough to produce stimulation is also enough to inhibit or reduce the production of phosphodiesterase, the first weakness also will be removed. So the old theory will become a good theory. So the statements second and third will remove the weaknesses in the old theory. So that will make the old theory correct one. So 2 and 3 are the conditions that will help the old theory to be correct theory. So option D will be the answer. All right. Now go to the next question. The following compounds can bind to specific receptors in the brain, except. So which is the thing that is not able to bind to the specific receptors? IBMX, we have seen it is a caffeine derivative. It is able to bind itself to the specific receptors. So this is something that is able to bind itself. So wrong answer. Caffeine definitely able to bind itself to the specific nerve receptors. That is why they are able to produce stimulation. Adenosine, yes, adenosine is also the natural chemical in the body that is binding itself to the specific receptors and reducing the stimulation. Theophylline, yes, theophylline is a derivative of caffeine that is found in tea. It is also binding to the specific nerve receptors and producing stimulation. So that is wrong. Phosphodiesterase. Phosphodiesterase is not a compound. It is a chemical. It is an enzyme that is in the brain. And this enzyme is not at all related to nerve receptors. It is related to the reduction of cyclic AMP. So phosphodiesterase is an enzyme that breaks down the chemical called cyclic AMP. Breaking down means it is destroying the cyclic AMP. So this is not something that is connected to nerve receptors. So this will be the answer. Again, careful reading. But see, many of the questions you don't even have to go back to the passage. Once you understand the passage, you can easily read the options and see the answers. This is the advantage of understanding the passage clearly by taking more time in understanding the passage. Question number 7. Caffeine's ability to bind to A1 and A2 receptors can be partially attributed to which of the following? So the paragraph 1 is saying that there are mainly two receptors in the human brain. They are called A1 and A2, and caffeine is able to, which is structurally similar to adenosine, is able to bind to both types of receptors. So because they are the caffeine is having the same structure as adenosine, it is able to do the same thing as adenosine is doing, that is binding itself to the receptors. So there are two receptors, mainly A1 and A2. So caffeine is able to bind itself to both the receptors. This is the answer. So why caffeine is able to bind to A1 and A2 receptors? That is the question. What is the reason? Very simply, the structural similarity between caffeine and adenosine. So is there any statement that says structural similarity between caffeine and adenosine? The option C says structural similarity between caffeine and neurotransmitters. No, that's wrong. The structural similarity between caffeine and adenosine is the reason why caffeine is able to attach to A1 and A2 receptors. So it's, C is wrong. Option A, chemical relationship between caffeine and phosphodiesterase. We are not at all talking about phosphodiesterase, one thing, and we are not talking about the chemical relationship at all. So wrong. The structural relationship between caffeine and adenosine. Correct, because structural similarity means it is a relationship. So structural relationship between caffeine and adenosine. Good answer, keep it in your mind. Ability of caffeine to stimulate behavior. No, the question is how they are, what is the reason why caffeine is able to bind to A1 and A2 receptors. This is not the answer. Natural occurrence of caffeine and adenosine in the brain. Caffeine is not naturally there in the brain. Adenosine is definitely naturally occurring in the brain. Caffeine is not naturally occurring in the brain. So caffeine is something that we consume. So very clearly, option B is the answer. The structural relationship between caffeine and adenosine is the reason why caffeine is able to mimic or copy the behavior of adenosine. So B is the answer. All right, question number 8. The author quotes Snyder and others in the third paragraph, most probably in order to. So what is the third paragraph doing? The third paragraph, the author is saying that Snyder and others reinforced their new theory by conducting certain experiments on laboratory mice, and where various derivatives of caffeine were introduced into the brains of the mice, and see how they are able to attach itself to the nerve receptors, and how these attaching to the nerve receptors is able to produce stimulation in the mice. And the conclusion is that, or the theory that developed is that the higher the amount of the caffeine derivatives to attach itself to the nerve receptors, the higher their ability to produce stimulation. So this is the essence of the third para. So it is option A, revealing some of the assumptions underlying their theory. Is the third para revealing any assumptions underlying their theory? No, it is not talking about any of the assumptions. So that is why this is not a good answer. Option B, summarize a major finding of their experiments. Good, because they are producing a summary. What is a summary? The higher the ability of the caffeine derivatives to attach itself to nerve receptors, the higher the amount of stimulation produced. That is the major finding. That finding they produced through the experiments conducted on laboratory mice. So good answer. Option C, point out that their experiments were limited to the mice. Is the main purpose of the passage third para is to point out that their experiments were limited to mice and hence not applicable to humans? No, the passage is saying that, or the paragraph is saying that in laboratory mice we have conducted, and these experiments can be extrapolated to human beings. That is what the passage says that. So you cannot say that the purpose of the third para is to say that their experiments are limited only to mouse. Maybe it is not applicable to human beings. No, wrong. Option D, indicate that experiments resulted only in general correlations. Means there are no specific findings, only general correlations. Wrong again. The passage says that the quoting. Quoting means what? Whatever is given in inverted commas, it is called quoting. So the third para, what is given in inverted commas, in general, they reported the ability of the compounds to compete at the receptors correlates with their ability to stimulate locomotion in the mice. That is, higher their capacity to bind, the higher their ability to stimulate. That is the quote. So this quote is basically talking about what they found through the experiments. Whereas this option says that it is only general correlation, means it is a general theory. There cannot be, it is not a proven theory. That is called a general correlation. The relationship between binding and stimulation is only a vague theory, not a proved theory. That is called general correlation. No, the paragraph very clearly says that this is a definite theory. So general correlation is wrong. Option A, refute the objections made by supporters of the old theory. The third paragraph is not at all concerning the older theory or refuting the objection. Refuting means disproving or challenging the objection. So we are not at all discussing the older theory in this particular paragraph. We are only talking about the third theory, or the first theory, the initial theory or the new theory. So this option is again wrong. So this is the best answer. They are summarizing the major result of their experiment. All right. Question number 9. The last paragraph of the passage performs which of the following functions? Again, a very easy question. In the last paragraph, the author is talking about the exception to their rule or the theory. The exception is regarding IBMX, which even though it is attaching itself to receptors, it is not able to produce stimulation. And the author says that this is not a major problem that is weakening the theory of Snyder, because Snyder says that this is to be expected. All psychoactive drugs or substances have this kind of mixed effects on the human body, depending on the concentration in which the substance is there in the brain. This is the explanation given. So very clearly, what could be the answer? Describe a disconfirming experimental result. What is disconfirming? Something that is not going along with the results of the experiment. Something that is an exception. So it is describing a disconfirming experimental result, means it is describing an exception, and reports the explanation given by Snyder and others in an attempt to reconcile this result with their theory. Yes, it is describing an exception, and it is going through the explanation provided by Snyder on how this exception can be reconciled with the existing theory, or how it agrees with the existing theory. So that is a very good answer. Keep it in your mind. Option B specifies the basis for the correlation observed by Snyder and others. This is itself is wrong, because there is the fourth paragraph is not talking about the basis for the correlation. What is the correlation? The relationship between binding and stimulation. That is not the what is the reason for that correlation. The fourth para is not at all talking about the basis for the correlation. That itself is, you only need to read this much. Don't waste reading time. Don't waste time reading the entire sentence. Anywhere you find a very clear inconsistency, remove it from your possible options. So this is how you save time. But for the sake of discussion, we can go through the remaining part of the sentence and presents an explanation in an attempt to make the correlation consistent with the operation. Again, wrong. The explanation is not at all related to making the relationship consistent with the operation. So this is why this is wrong. Option C elaborates the description of the correlation observed by Snyder and others. Same thing. That means it explains the correlation observed by Snyder, correlation between binding and stimulation. No, it is not explaining the correlation. It is pointing out a discrepancy in the correlation. So this is why this again is wrong. And suggests that an additional explanation in an attempt to make the correlation consistent. It is not suggesting an additional explanation. It is actually describing an exception to the correlation and giving an explanation that makes it consistent with the new theory. So whereas it says that this is makes it consistent with the older theory. Again, wrong. So everything is wrong here. Option D reports inconsistent experimental data and describes the method Snyder uses to reanalyze this data. So it says that reporting an inconsistent experimental data, it is correct, because it is reporting an exception, and describes the method Snyder and others will use to reanalyze this data and how they are going to reanalyze this data. This is wrong, because they say that there is no need to reanalyze this inconsistent data, because they say that this inconsistency is already expected, because all psychoactive substances have mixed effects on the human brain depending on the levels of concentration. So this again is not an answer. Option E provides an example of the hypothesis proposed by Snyder. Again, wrong. This the last para is not providing an example, it is providing an exception, and relates this example to caffeine's property. Again, wrong. So that is why this is again clearly wrong. So very clearly the answer is option A. So why I have chosen this passage is that this passage is first of all, it is talking about a scientific concept. Many people have difficulty understanding scientific concepts when given in high-level English. Even engineering graduates, I have observed, they have some difficulty in understanding these kind of passages. So you need to have this ability to read and understand various passages or difficult passages on various topics. This will come only through your wide reading. You extend the horizons of your reading by reading articles on different subjects and with various complexities of language and content. That will help you to understand and read and understand different types of passages without a problem. So the main focus again will be on reading and understanding. All other things come secondary. So this is what you should be focusing on. So in order to highlight that particular aspect, I have selected this passage. I hope you have found the video to be useful in your preparation. The video has become slightly lengthy, I know that, but this much explanation is required for people of all levels to understand and assimilate the techniques of learning. So I hope this video was useful. If you have liked the content, please like, share, and subscribe. That will motivate me to come up with further videos on these kind of topics. Thank you. Bye-bye.